Everybody, welcome to the world this week. A lot has been happening, especially in New York, where over 170 world leaders joined the UN General Assembly. We'll be in New York shortly. First, with me in the studio are Tal Shalev and Charles Biblizer, both of I-24 News. We'll talk about the latest international developments, and we'll start with Syria. Well, in the blink of an eye, we have the Russian army here next door protecting Assad with the silent consent of Israel, while President Obama advocates exactly the opposite.
There is no room for accommodating an apocalyptic cult like ISIL. And the United States makes no apology for using our military as part of a broad coalition to go after them. We do so with a determination to ensure that there will never be a safe haven for terrorists who carry out these crimes. And we have demonstrated over more than a decade of relentless pursuit of al-Qaeda. We will not be outlasted by extremists.
Well, Tal, more and more criticism about the Obama administration basically lets Putin take the stage.
Well, definitely there's a growing assumption, and probably many people agree, that the fact that the Obama administration in the past 7 years has decided to disengage with the Middle East has created such a vacuum that it is almost impossible for Putin not to step in. This is nature. When there's a vacuum, someone wants to fill it up. But actually, it seems that there's the United States might be happy with what is happening now. The Obama administration might be happy with what is happening now. It means the Russians are actually dealing with IS. In the good case, they will be able to put the lead on IS. And in the worst case scenario, Putin gets entangled in a never-ending war in Syria with Sunni states against him. It's not necessarily so bad, but yes, definitely for the optics this week, it looked at the UNGA that Putin definitely succeeded with a very major PR achievement. He is back on world stage, despite the fact that the U.S. has been trying to isolate him since the Ukraine crisis. Looking more,
as we say, leaderly, would you say?
Oh, for sure. It appears as though the mantle has been passed in terms of the fight against IS. What's going on the ground specifically, the Russian parliament has approved the use of airstrikes by Russian military in Syria. As well, this comes on the heel of a deal that was signed between Iraq, Iran, Syria, and the Russians to coordinate in Iraq. And there are reports already that Russian military personnel have arrived in Baghdad. The fact that the U.S. was excluded from a deal like that, given their involvement in Iraq over the last 10 years, is actually quite shocking. Literally, Putin has seen the vacuum, as Tal said. He's protecting his interests. He's filling it. He's also now basically consolidated his control over every outcome. Either he will be able to keep Assad in power, or he will have the ability to select or even veto the successor, because he is such a major player now in what is happening in the whole Syrian chaos.
All right, let's talk about American politics. Here's the news.
It's become clear to me that this prolonged leadership turmoil would do irreparable harm to the institution. But last night I started to think about this, and this morning I woke up and I said my prayers, as I always do, and I decided, today's the day I'm going to do this. As simple as that.
Charles, was this his own decision, or maybe he had no choice?
It's a surprising move. There are a lot of different analyses that could be taken about it, but basically at the end of the day, what happened there is that there was an insurrection within the conservative base of the Republican Party that was very upset with Boehner about not confronting Obama, despite having majorities in the House, in the Senate, and also a conservative majority in the U.S. Supreme Court. So you're talking the inability to repeal Obamacare, the inability to confront Obama's edicts on immigration, etc. And this extreme wing of the Republican Party is now threatening to shut down Congress over the defunding of Planned Parenthood. Right. So this is basically Boehner getting out of the way. His presumed replacement, McCarthy, is also an establishment figure, however, so it's not very clear whether or not this is going to really mollify the conservative base.
Some GOP leaders said that the crazies have taken over the party.
Well, this is basically the problem. We have a very, very fractured GOP caucus. We have a big division between the constituents and the conservative base and the establishment. The constituents want to break all the rules. They want to go full force. Exactly, and that is exactly also what explains the same phenomena, explains the rise of the non-politicians candidates in the 2016 campaign. If we're talking about Donald Trump, if we're talking about Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina, this reflects the conservative base, which, by the way, are a majority of the primary voters. So this reflects the big gap between the establishment. It's not about ideology. It's more about style. The conservative base wants a much more dramatic and much more offensive style than the one the politicians on Capitol Hill and in Washington are actually using.
Even the Pope is not conservative enough.
Well, there was this whole the GOP versus the Pope while he was there, and you can understand this to a certain degree because he's one of the most liberal popes to come along in a long, long time. He's very liberal on immigration. He's semi-anti-capitalism. He spoke out in Congress against ending the death penalty. But the bottom line is this is a world leader that is extremely popular, and in my opinion, I don't think he cares one iota what the GOP thinks about him. And he made that very clear. And from the millions of people that came out to watch him, especially in Philadelphia, he remains a figure, possibly the most influential world leader besides Putin at the moment.
At the moment. Charles and Tal, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If not for the Pope's visit to the U.S., the entire week would have been China Week in America. We are talking about the visit of President Xi Jinping and China's First Lady that was a little overshadowed by the Pope, but nonetheless had all the marks of an historic event. So for more on this, we are joined by I-24 News correspondent in New York, Danielle Ziri. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Jacob.
Well, it looks like President Xi Jinping came to America with a bag full of money and actually for worthy causes.
Yes, absolutely. A bag full of money, and it seemed like he was sort of throwing gifts in the air here and there. It started on Saturday with the UN, where he said that China was going to contribute $2 billion to helping the poorest countries in the world really develop. And in addition to that, he said that China was going to double, or actually more than double and triple and quadruple this funding to $12 billion over the next 15 years to support this international agenda that was just adopted, the Agenda for Sustainable Development for 2030. And that agenda aims, this number one goal is to really eradicate poverty in the world. So China was really going to contribute to that. But it's not all, actually. In the UN speech that happened on Monday at the UN General Assembly, the Chinese president really was also throwing things in the air and sort of giving gifts to everyone. And everyone got their share. The African Union, for example, got $100 million for helping with African crisis. And he said also that China was going to participate in peacekeeping missions around the world with the UN. So really throwing things in the air and giving everyone their share. And even the US got something because, as you know, he actually said that China is going to be ordering 300 Boeing aircrafts from the US to China. This order is about $38 billion. So a very big boost for Boeing. And some people say they might have just sold out to China.
All in all, Danielle, the Chinese went out of their way to put a positive face on this trip to the U.S., right?
Absolutely, and you know, it started with a lavish state dinner at the White House and Michelle Obama in a gown that really turned heads, and Vera Wang, a Chinese designer, and really the whole shebang at the White House. Really the goal was to sort of put a good atmosphere between the two leaders. And you know, there's even pretty interesting people at this state dinner because a lot of people from the cinema industry, the animation industry, and also the tech industry showed up, including Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, who, by the way, posted later that he spoke to the Chinese president only in Chinese. We had seen his skills in Chinese a few months back. As you know, his wife is Chinese, right. And that would have been an interesting meeting to see, as you know, since Facebook is still blocked in China. And speaking of tech, the Chinese president also met with the various tech leaders in the U.S. in Seattle on Wednesday. There was a big conference with the CEOs of Apple, for example, Amazon, and all these people met the Chinese president, and really everyone sort of tried to put a positive face on and get along.
Right. But having said that, there are still disturbing issues between the U.S. and China.
Yes, there's key issues that are dividing the two world powers, and these key issues are a lot of economic tensions, which I'm sure Donald Trump would want to agree with me on that, since he made a point of mentioning it every time he speaks. But there's also things such as cybersecurity. We've seen scandals of hacking and spying from China to the U.S. and vice versa in the past couple of months that have been big headlines in the world. And also, of course, there's concern in the U.S. about human rights and human rights violations in China, and particularly freedom of speech, since, as we said, social media and sites like Google, YouTube are still blocked in China. And so these things are still very, very dividing. There were some progress made, not much according to analysts, but some progress was made. For example, on issues of climate change and cybersecurity, they pledged to collaborate a little more in the future.
Right. So we can say that for the Obama himself, at least, it was less pleasant than the Pope's visit, but much better than Putin's, right?
This event really sort of went under the radar because of the Pope, and it was less pleasant, yes. The White House did describe the discussions between the Chinese and the American president as frank and candid, which usually is code for full of disagreement, but definitely more pleasant than what happened with Putin on Monday after the speeches at the UN when the General Assembly started its debate. And that meeting apparently lasted about 90 minutes, and the key really issues were to sort of laid out positions on Syria and on Ukraine, things that have been really dividing the two countries, Russia and the US. And they sort of talked about that, and it was the first time they met face to face and talked in the past 2 years, since there was really a freeze in these encounters. So very important meeting, definitely less pleasant, more tense, but the White House did say that they got some clarity out of it.
Right. Daniel Ziri in New York City, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's no stopping in the flow of refugees from Syria to Greece. One of the main destinations is the Greek island of Lesbos. They get there by boats, those who are lucky enough to get there by boats. With us from Lesbos is Shai Avshalom Zavadi. He's an Israeli volunteer equipped with a camera. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Yaakov.
Now, this is a very unusual scene, a beautiful Greek island on one hand and a human tragedy on the other. Describe the scene for us.
Well, Yaakov, this island is filled with refugees. You see a lot of people running away from their homes, looking for a better future. The streets are filled with people who are sleeping there next to the shore, next to the beaches, everywhere basically. People looking for a solution, a temporary solution, in order for them to get the time and get the documents they need in order to get to mainland Europe and find a better future for themselves. The refugee camps look terrible. Some people live in tents, some don't even have tents, and sleep on the ground, under the sky. Conditions are terrible, especially for people coming here with families, for pregnant women, for old people. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Very hard to see, very hard pictures, but people are looking for a better future.
How do you position yourself in the middle of this drama?
I'm here as a part of a delegation which came from the American Jewish Committee, AJC, in order to try and help and work with the Greek Jewish community and our representatives from our Paris offices, and also with another Israeli organization, Israel. We are here in 3 teams. There is a medical team, which is basically stationed on the shore, helping the refugees who are coming, giving them the first medical aid. We have another team, which is the psychosocial team, working with the refugees who are in the camps, trying to give them the social help they need. And also the 3rd team, which is distributing food, water, and equipment that is needed for the refugees, which is things like baby carriages, like sleeping bags, things that are very needed for people who are trying to temporarily move themselves and don't have anything with them.
It must be very difficult for you emotionally to deal with this.
Well, in order to operate in such conditions, you have to think about what you want to do and what you want to achieve. It's important to think that you're doing good to the people, even though you hear terrible stories. You hear children telling you about children drawing basically paintings of heads being beheaded, the scenes that they saw back in their homes. You have to try and detach yourself and think on the goal and the purpose of what you're doing.
There's another famous picture of the little Syrian boy on the beaches of Turkey, but unfortunately there are many like him. Have you seen similar tragedies there?
Unfortunately, there are a lot of tragedies like this. Fortunately for me, I haven't seen in my eyes such a thing, but I spoke with some refugees. A young 5-year-old Syrian refugee told me that she came from Syria. They were in a boat. They bumped into a yacht, and their boat just crashed. They were in the sea for over 6 hours, screaming for help, and nobody came. One of the refugees got to the shore and got some help. When they all were rescued, they found that her younger sister was missing, and they haven't found her so far. We think she's dead, unfortunately. These are terrible stories. They happen all the time, unfortunately. But all that we can do is try to help them to promote human rights and make a better future for them.
Shai in the island of Lesbos, thank you very much. And this has been The World This Week. We'll see you here next Sunday. Have a great week.